Hi, my name is Chris Lee. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I specialize in past life regression therapy. I've been doing this for over 18 years. The reason why you're watching this video is because you've chosen to do a one-on-one past life regression session with me or one of my team, whom I've personally trained. By watching this video, your one-on-one session will be more effective and you'll know what to expect. One of the first things I like to do when I'm doing my talk is to have a show of hands. How many people here believe in past lives? Usually most people have their hand up. Then I say, how many people aren't quite sure? And hands up. There's usually a few. And I remind them that's fine, because I don't care if you believe in past lives or not, but my therapy works either way. And occasionally I've asked, or does anybody not believe in past lives? And an interesting one happened in one talk where a lady put up her hand that when I asked who doesn't believe in past lives. So we politely asked her why she was there. And she had a good answer. She said, my daughter believes in past lives and she needed a ride here today. So we all had a good laugh at that one. My mantra again is, if you're not sure it's past lives, but your ache, pain, fear, phobia disappear, who cares? Now, another thing I always like to check with the audience is, show of hands, how many people here have ever been hypnotized? And it's amazing is about only 20% of the crowd will put their hand up. So that is one of the reasons why I'm having this talk, this video, is to explain what hypnosis isn't, because too many people out there have a fear of hypnosis. Can you believe that? You can thank television or hypnotist shows for that. And what I do like to remind people is that when they say they've never been in hypnosis, I remind them is that you're in hypnosis 5 to 20 times per day. A lot of people just don't realize what hypnosis is. So the next thing I always check with to explain what hypnosis is, some examples are, how many people remember high school and had a boring subject and daydreamed? So most people put their hand up. Daydreaming is hypnosis. Deep concentration and deep relaxation. And another way of explaining hypnosis is, have you ever watched TV or a show or read a book so intently that you don't hear people talking to you? Well, most people put their hand up for that one too. How about yourself? That means you're in hypnosis. Again, single focus concentration. How about memorizing? You ever remember memorizing a poem or perhaps an address? And what happens is that you have to use hypnosis. Again, hypnosis, single focus concentration. So how did you memorize? You blocked everything out and just went over and over till you got it using hypnosis. Another way of explaining hypnosis too is, have you ever driven for a long period of time, like a few hours? It's usually about an hour and a half sequence or cycle that you actually start to slow down, get a little bit weary, and hopefully you didn't drive off the road and come back up again. You're actually going into hypnosis again. That is just simply calming the conscious, part of your normal life cycles. And another way of explaining hypnosis for the people that still aren't sure if what hypnosis is, I simply say, how many people here slept in the last 24 hours? Of course the hands go up, and then I explain to them, hypnosis, deep sleep, you're in hypnosis. So then I say, now show of hands, how many people have been hypnotized? And of course it's unanimous. People do not realize what hypnosis is. They've watched too much television. Good example are hypnotist shows. Then I always do a show of hands, how many people have ever been to a hypnotist show? And there's actually, or watched one, or saw on television, and actually a lot of people have done that. So then I explain, then I ask how many people have been up on stage. And there's always usually one or two in the group, and then you get a lot of people saying, no way, no way. That's because they think that it's a loss of control. Human nature is we don't like losing control. I'm sure you don't. Nobody does. But when you see your friend going up on a stage and they're acting silly, well, that's when people get this fear of loss of control, because their friend is normally quite, mature, very quiet, and they're up on stage acting silly. Well, let me explain what that's all about. When you're on stage, first of all, it's voluntary. There's a law against dragging people up on stage. It's called voluntary. And those people that are up on stage during the production are totally 100% aware of what they're doing. They are just acting, though, at the age of 7 or 8 or younger. So think of some logic here. How hard is it when you're 7 or 8 or younger to pretend you're playing musical instruments that aren't there or barking like dogs? It's not hard at all, is it? So they're just acting like a child, because that's around the age 7 or 8 when your inhibitions come in. Must be more adult, mature, that type of thing. And sometimes people say, well, what if I do something I'll be really embarrassed with? You won't, because you're still there, totally there, but you're just having fun. Now, another way of explaining a bit more about hypnosis and hypnotist shows is that if they're under his control, that's another key word that is not a good one, because under suggests that you're under somebody's control. Let me just explain. Hypnosis is 100% self-hypnosis, all done by yourself. For example, did somebody force you to daydream? Did somebody force you to ignore people while you're watching TV? Or no, because it's all done by yourself, totally in your control. So when you're watching a production, you'll probably notice, if not next time you're watching one, during the show, the hypnotist or his assistant will often send a few people off. This happens, and think about some logic here. If they're under his control, why do they have to send people off? It's because they're not under his control, and kids get bored. Imagine if you're getting really bored, are you going to get up there and play musical instruments that aren't there? Not really. You get bored and you just sit still. It doesn't look good for the show, so the assistant will send you off, say thank you for coming up. So no, nobody is under anybody's control. You are in 100% self-control and self-hypnosis. And one more thing, to explain how hypnosis doesn't work, I've had many people who will introduce me to their friends as he's a clinical hypnotherapist. And their friend will think that they've created a brand new joke, and they'll put their hands up like this and turn to the side. And I go something like, wow, I haven't heard that joke today, or that type of thing. But I like to bug them. I say to them, why did you do that? And it's really sad, is because what they say next is what they actually do believe. They'll say things like, basically, you might hypnotize me and make me do something I don't want to do. Well, that's very, very silly, because how could I do that? If I really could do that, why am I here? There's more money in Las Vegas. Why don't I go down there and hypnotize the dealers to give me their money? Or look how many countries could make use of hypnotists. Send them out and hypnotize their enemies to quit. Look at all the lives they'd save, money they'd save. Or, hey, headlines. 6 more banks robbed by hypnotists. They were forced, hypnotized to give them their money. Well, do you ever see anything like that? No, because it doesn't happen. It's 100% self-hypnosis. Nobody can hypnotize you. I cannot hypnotize you. I am a clinical hypnotherapist, but I don't hypnotize you. I help you slow down into hypnosis after you give me permission. When I took my training in clinical hypnotherapy in Vancouver in 1995, it was on current life hypnotherapy, not past life. And being a sort of typical male, I wasn't sure about past life, because males, we like to have more proof and that type of thing. So when at some point during the program, in fact there was 24 of us, we were all teamed up. I was actually teamed up with a medical doctor because he was tired of giving people pills for the placebo effect. So at some point during the training, somebody must have mentioned to the head instructor about past life regression. So the head instructor said, show of hands, how many people would like to see a past life regression session or demonstration? So 24 hands went up. Then he said, who wants to volunteer? 24 hands came down. Nothing to do with fear. Nobody was afraid of it. We just wanted to be watching it rather than being in it. So we bartered around and, bartered back and forth. You go, you go, you go. Finally, Hugo went up Just kidding. One of the receptionists, one of the students went up. Now, he regressed her back to the 1930s as a boy about 10 years old in the States, playing on train tracks. And even back then, they had electric switches. And unfortunately, train came along, switch moved, caught the boy's foot, and unfortunately ran over him, killed him. So I went, So I had my notebook out and was making notes, and I went, because I do that. Open-minded. And then he regressed her back to 1942 in England as a female during a bombing raid in London, because obviously World War II was on. Now, I made notes on that one too, but really it got me really interested in this past life regression stuff, technical terms, is the next day in class, the girl stood up in front of the whole gang and said, "You know, guys," she said, "I always wondered why I hated thunder and trains." And everybody, especially me, went, But the biggest thing that really got me into past life regression therapy was the next statement that she said was, "It doesn't bother me now." Having this problem for many, many years totally disappeared by seeing it once. And that is also how I do my therapy, seeing it once. So, I finished my program with current life, taking people back to the kid and see why they hated their parents or whatever. Now, I started my practice out in a small city in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver. And what happened is that I was doing my stereotype hypnotherapy, setting up my practice. And what it was is that basically you handled smoking and weight and a bit of confidence, that type of thing. Now, I found that using current life regression, that my effectiveness was about 20%, which I find not very high. Is that very high? Go with this. It's fine. No, you're still there. So I started thinking about past life, and I thought, I'm going to do some more studying on that. So I studied more, bought books. There's many good books out there on past life, good to read. And I started applying it to my volunteers. I had a number of volunteers I worked with. And I found that using the past life therapy, that the effectiveness got better and better and better. I read this, tried that worked, read this, that worked. And I started adding it to my practice. And I found that using past life regression, the results are about 95% effective. That is a big difference. Go like this, that's very good, very effective. Now there's one downside to being 95% effective. And I usually ask the crowd, what do they think that, what it is? And some people think it's that 5%, and no, that is not the downside. The downside is you don't get a lot of repeat business. Because once you've taken care of their concern, why would they come back to see you? They don't have to. Also, when I'm doing my session, I don't spend the normal about an hour and a half session just handling one concern, because I would be feeling guilty about wasting most of that session. In a proper session, you can actually have the therapist take care of, that's done our training, 2 to 7 different things. And it didn't take me long to wipe out the small town because, again, not too much repeat business. So when I finished with that city, I decided to go over to England for a while. And while I was over there, I started doing workshops. Now, I don't do workshops anymore because I find that they're not quite as effective as one-on-one. So it works the best is having a talk and then doing one-on-one. So, because there is one advantage I have found of doing workshops. Now, the way a workshop does work is that you work generically, have everybody slow down, and unfortunately I can't ask each person what they're seeing, what they're doing, because you hear each other. You got to remember is that a lot of people still think this is la la land, you float away, you disappear. Totally wrong. When you're daydreaming, do you disappear? You certainly don't have to lay down, because if you're daydreaming in school, the teacher would kind of notice that, wouldn't they? And if the teacher starts to talk to you, you're certainly well aware they're there, so you do not disappear, you're there all the time. Hypnosis is simply slowing you down. Now, when you're doing workshops, is that you slow everybody down, and then everybody in between, I have them come up a bit more aware, and then we chat about where we've been and what they've seen, that type of thing. Now, the main thing I've found that is interesting with workshops is that quite often when we're talking about who's been where and what life, etc., often 2 or 3 people in the group have been in the same past life. Same time, same past life. And that brings me up to the next little question. I always do a show of hands at this point. How many people out there have a soulmate? And a lot of people do put their hand up. Then I remind them that, no, they don't. You don't have a soul mate. You have a soul group. We travel with a group. Quite often you will recognize them and don't know why they're there, because you're not supposed to know, because you wouldn't learn your lessons. But you do sort of recognize them. So like if you meet 10 new people and you go, wow, that person over there seems like I've known them for all my life, or can't stand that person over there, don't know why. Because quite often your worst enemy is one of your soul group. Might sound a little odd, but it's because we have lessons to learn, but if you know what role they're playing, you wouldn't learn, would you? Now, the reason why these people have sometimes popped in the same lives in the workshop is time to meet each other, that type of thing. But I've found from that it is basically better to do the one-on-one, because I can ask you more questions, that type of thing. Now, I found that, again, workshops can be fine, but the most effectiveness is doing one-on-one. Now here's where I help you explain how this works, so the one-on-one works better, is that I'm going to draw a picture of the human mind. Not the human brain, but the human mind. And what I usually do is get somebody to volunteer for a model and draw a picture of their mind. This is a picture of the human mind. Now you can see why art wasn't my best subject in school, but at least I got them to meet there. Now, the mind is made up of 2 parts. Usually I ask who can guess what they are, but they are conscious and subconscious. I'm sure you've heard of that. For some people it's unconscious, but no, we call it subconscious. So let me just write part of here, the conscious. Well, short form con. Then I usually do a little bit of a test here, show of hands. Who thinks the conscious, now conscious, subconscious, one is bigger than the other? Show of hands, who thinks the conscious, the bigger part? And I put my hand up and almost nobody follows that, because we know that the subconscious is much bigger. And so I'll put the subconscious down here. When we are born, these 2 are together. They don't separate to about the age of 7 or 8. Whoa, isn't that the age of people acting silly up on stage in hypnosis shows? Is that a coincidence? No, because 7 or 8, that's when we change. We're thinking more, get just stuff drummed into us, but before that, we're having fun. Now, the proportions, when I took my training, it was so far back ago that there wasn't a thing called internet. Anybody here remember that? And the figures we were given are the percentage of the conscious, subconscious. I decided about 5 years ago to check it up on the internet and found it was pretty close, and I decided to take the actual figures from some unknown guy. You might have heard of Albert Einstein. Okay. Anyhow, it's 5% for the conscious, and I don't think you need a calculator for this. It's 95% for the subconscious. So you can see that there's quite a big difference. Now, one thing about the mind is that around age 7 or 8 they separate. The conscious part of the mind, though, is actually just your processor. It tries to calculate, thinks it's in charge, but it's not. It's using information from the subconscious. The subconscious is your computer. It is the most sophisticated computer ever out there, and I don't think it'll ever be beaten. It stores everything. Even every second of your current life is stored in there. In fact, I could take you back to the second you were born. And I get people say, why would you do that? I've actually had a few clients that wanted to see who their mother was. It wasn't to do with adoption, it was to do because they thought their sister was rather close to them, or an aunt was too close. It turned out it was their actual mother. I also make sure that they could handle the information too. But past lives. Now most of you in the group have your hand up that they believe in past lives. So then I ask, is this your first one or second one, or who thinks they've had lots? And most people put their hand up because apparently there is new souls, but they usually don't come to the talks. They don't have a lot of the problems that they're dragging along in life, like aches, pains, fears, and phobias that need attention. So if you've had, and I've had people say they've had over 100, 200, 300, 500, but the point I'm making, if you've had tons of past lives, every second of every past life is stored in your subconscious. It is a powerful, powerful computer storage unit, and it's got lots of room. So now what happened though is that around the age of 7 or 8, your conscious subconscious, they start separating because we have a layer that comes in between the two of them. It's called your critical layer. Now that's about the last big technical term that I use. I give it a different name. It's sort of an acronym. It's the JUNK level. So I'll just write that down. JUNK. Oh my goodness. That stands for junk. We have a lot of junk that's in that layer that our subconscious works off of. You see, the subconscious is very, very powerful, but it does not have a right or wrong. It does what you tell it, or what's in the junk level. But the only nice thing I've ever seen that's in the junk level is, another name for it also is repetition. For example, I asked people in the crowd who has a job that you go to for, same way every day. And a lot of people put their hands up. Don't know about you, but a lot of people do. And then I say, do you write down the address every day? Do you look at the street names every day? If you do, you got another problem we got to work on. Okay. And also a good example, have you ever driven home daydreaming and you get in the driveway and you go, whoa, how did I get here? Did I go through those red lights? Did I stop at the stop signs? And this is annoying too because I wanted to stop and get groceries or gas. This happened to almost everybody because repetition. You do something enough times, it goes into the junk level, the subconscious works off of it. It knows you're not paying attention, and the subconscious job is to help you. If it doesn't help you and you die, it doesn't have a job anymore. So it helps you. It also, the subconscious calculates about 1 million times faster than your conscious does. That's fast, isn't it? Oh yes. So another thing too that's in your junk level is your job. If you hear people say they've got expertise, not really. We don't have expertise. If you've done a job enough times, over and over and over, it becomes automatic. The more you do it, the more easily it comes to you. So there's your sort of expertise. The main thing that goes into that critical layer is that well-meaning parents, when we're 7 or 8, start giving us, teaching us, maturity and answering our hundreds and hundreds of questions, that type of thing. And they teach us what they were taught by their parents, who were taught by their parents, etc., up the line. But does that make it right? No, not really at all. But what happened was, there's about 3 things I want to expound on today that's in the junk level that we should take care of. One of them is just a simple thing, show of hands. I say to the crowd, how many people know how to swim? Interesting enough, a fair number of people do. And then I look at the ones that that have their hand up for swimming. I say, there's 2 ways of learning. One of them is lessons. The other one is getting thrown in. So I said, who got thrown in? And there's actually a few that have, but most of us take lessons. Now, why I'm bringing this up is, why are we taking lessons when we're actually born with the ability to swim? We are an animal. Animals can swim. Cats can swim. Ours swam twice when it fell in the pond, didn't like it. Now, human beings, we're an animal. Survival. We can swim. We're born with the ability. Now, a good example, there's a company down in the States I researched a while ago. What they do is that they take the parents, lock them in a windowless room, and next to the pool, of course, take the child, generally 6 months to a year is about the average, good time to start, and they throw the child into the water and video it, swimming. It's not an option, because if you had a company that does this and the child drowns half the time, I don't think you'd be in business very long. You would be sued. So it does happen that they swim always. It's automatic. Now, then they take the child out of the water and take the parents out and show them the video. Who, when the parents see it, they go, wow, this is interesting. And if they had seen this happening, instead of being locked up, what do you think they probably would have done? They would be like most people. You would jump in to save the child's life. I want to point out something interesting here, actually quite silly. Why would you jump in to save the life of somebody that's swimming? Doesn't make sense, does it? Because the reason for that is that we have junk drummed into us. Things like, don't go near the water, it's dangerous, you can't swim, you haven't had your lessons, you're not old enough yet. I'm sure we've all heard those type of things, and you hear them enough times, it becomes the junk level which the subconscious works off of. So you jump in to save the child's life, not because you didn't happen to notice it swimming, it's because it's reflex. They're going to drown in your mind's eye, or the junk level. So that makes a very profound statement here, which I'm going to make. Why do we take lessons to learn to swim? We don't. We take lessons to learn how to overcome the fear of drowning. That's been drummed into us. Because if you happen to fall in the water, and let's say you're an adult and haven't had your lessons, subconscious is going to say, hey, we're going for a swim, we can do it. It's a natural thing. But wait a minute, I have to check your junk level because I have to work off of it. You haven't had your lessons yet. Oh no, it's drowning time again. So, how did we do it last time? Panic is a good one, works every time. How about inhaling water? Yeah, we're dead. Next life, please. So, yes, we take lessons to learn to swim. No, to learn how to overcome the fear of drowning. So that is the main thing. Now, another piece of junk is that we have is also, it's called memory. Does anybody here have a memory? It's usually what I ask, and people laugh, and some say used to, or that type of thing. Now, the reason why I brought that up is because that's one that we do not make good use of. We are born with a perfect memory. Your subconscious actually has the ability of, if you look at a page that's in focus, within a split second, it's absorbed and stored in your subconscious. Now, why do we not take advantage of that? Remember, the conscious thinks it's in charge. The subconscious is actually in charge, and a good example, it's also polite, lets you think it is, that your conscious is in charge. But you think about the logic here, if your conscious is in charge, are you telling yourself to breathe right now? Are you telling yourself to have my heart beat? Or if you cut yourself, does it heal by looking at it and say, heal, heal, heal? Doesn't work that way. The conscious part of the mind has a short attention span, goes off and does something else. But you'll notice after a few days that it does heal. It's because your subconscious can affect your molecular structure. It's very good at this. Now, back to the memory. When you go to read, why we don't take advantage of that is because the conscious has created a junk level. How are you taught to read when you're younger? I've heard many different things, but basically is one word at a time. Sound familiar? We're taught to read one word at a time. Now, if you have that in your junk level, the subconscious is going to go and read, and it's going to say, oh no, he or she's going to read another tedious task because they can only read one word at a time. So I have to give them one word at a time. So here's your first word, D, 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 D. Here's another one. Good example of how we do sometimes try to fix that. Is anybody here, I always say, ever heard of speed reading programs? And a lot of people have. Has anybody taken them? One or two usually have. Basically what it is that in speed reading programs, they teach you to read a line at a time, then a paragraph, and finally a page at a time. Now, are you getting smarter? No. You are catching up to the subconscious. The subconscious already reads a page in a split second. You're catching up to it. What you're really doing is not improving, you're unblocking. Because we have other blocks that the subconscious works off of. Besides reading one word at a time, another block is must study to be smart, must cram for exams. Anybody heard of those? Of course we did. And if you have those in your junk level, those are blocks. Because, well, gee, you didn't study too hard for this test, so I can't give you all the information. That's what the subconscious would be working with and giving you not much help. What happened is you're unblocking. This also brings me up to a point about the type of person. I'm sure when you were in high school, and it wasn't me either. In high school, do you remember that there always used to be one or two people, students, fellow students, that always got good marks that never studied? Weren't they annoying? Were you one of them? In a group, there's usually about 10% that are in that category or less. And sometimes they gingerly put their hand up, but you know, I say you can stay, it's not a problem. Now, what happened is I found from studying on these type of people that got good marks that never ever studied was simple, is that they were lazy. And it's really interesting is because the ones that had their hand up about not needing to study always have that silly sheepish grin on their face. It's because they aren't stupid or anything, is they didn't feel like studying. I can't be bothered. I'll remember. I'm sure I can. It'll come to me. Well, those are not blocks. Must study to be smart. Must cram for exams. Those are blocks. I have to go past them. But saying it'll come to me and I don't have to study, those are not blocks. So the information will always flow to them. Wish I'd known that when I was younger. But there's another little thing though. You do have to have at least seen the material in the book. Can't quite put the book to your forehead and try cyclically reading it. All you're going to get is a flat forehead. So you do have to. One guy told me all he did was thumb through it, and that's all he needed. That's correct, because subconscious reads that fast. So now, speaking of memory, does anybody here ever say to the crowd, have a time, at least once in your life, that you couldn't remember somebody's name? And everybody got their hand up. Isn't it annoying? Especially if you're talking to the person, because you're probably not going to be listening to them very well because you're subconsciously going, what's their name, what's their name? Or in your mind's eye, I mean. And also, it doesn't usually work well. Because we start saying things while we're listening or trying to remember the name. Your conscious is babbling on, like I'm doing right now, is saying things like, I can't remember that name, I'm brain dead, I used to remember. Or a silly one is like, I can remember faces but not names. Well, that's silly because they're both in the same part of the subconscious. And one of the biggest ones that we use, and I want you to lose this, is most of us say things in our mind like, oh, I'm getting older. That is silly. Totally useless. They have proven that memory and age have almost nothing to do with each other. It's believing it. And for those of you that are kind of young out there, remember the second you're born, you're getting older. So people get older all the time. But that's a crutch. It becomes new junk. Like, oh, I've actually heard people the other day saying, oh, I don't have to remember, I'm getting older. That's a piece of junk. Subconscious works off of it. Remember, we have the ability to total recall. But if you believe that you can't remember everything, subconscious says, I'll help you. We'll only remember some of the stuff. So, what I do is have you noticed that maybe 5 minutes after the person's gone, or 3 a.m., you remember the name? Isn't that annoying? Well, you know, I just phone them up and say, I remember your name, but that's kind of tacky. But I'm going to explain how this works. Because I used to ask people why that worked, and they'd say things like, oh, they're relaxed, or that type of thing. No, not even close. What has changed is you've stopped talking to yourself. What it is that when you're saying things out loud, or in your conscious, right, is that you don't realize your subconscious is listening 24/7. It's very powerful. It's there to help you. It does what you tell it. The subconscious has no sense of humor. It is extremely literal. Doesn't have expressions or that type of thing. It listens literally. So when you are saying to yourself something like, I can't remember that person's name, it'll stop thinking. It'll stop looking for it. Because you have given it a directive, which is, I can't remember that name, so it does what you tell it. Even though you didn't mean it that way, it takes that as a directive. Again, I cannot stress stronger, be careful how you talk to yourself. Now, what's changed is that you've stopped talking to yourself, you stopped telling it to stop, to not look. So the subconscious goes, okay, he or she's not telling me not telling me to stop. I'll go find that name. Oh, it just took another couple moments, wish to give me more time, and there's the name. I'll throw it up into the conscious. And they're all happy, they remember the name. Too bad the person that their name that they're trying to remember is gone, but it's there. Then what I do is I ask the crowd who would like to spend about the next 2 or 3 minutes to learn how to improve your memory extremely effectively and simply. And everybody's hand goes up. How about your hand? It's a simple little thing I've added on this video to teach you how to improve your memory. What happens is when you have a problem, try to remember a name, for example, there's 2 things that you say to yourself, and the third thing is an action. The first thing, when you can't remember saying a name, the first thing you say to yourself in your head, I have a good memory. I have a perfect memory. One of those. I have a good memory. Now, the second thing you say to yourself is, but it'll only take a moment. The third thing that you do is an action. It's called shut up. Give it some time to work. We are a fast food society, aren't we? Well, I gave it 2 seconds. It didn't work. Well, guess what? You just stopped it again. Give it a moment or two. Now, what happens is that, remember your wordology. Do not say, I will have a good memory. You say, I have a good memory. Big difference. Even though it doesn't feel right because you're trying to improve your memory, still say, I have a good memory. Because if you say, I will have, you may as well say you'll be filthy rich too, because that probably won't happen either. Your subconscious, remember, is very literal. It needs to have a time frame. I have a good memory means now. Even though it doesn't feel right, say it because it'll adjust to do what you said. But saying I have good memory, it moves so that it is true. Not I will have because it doesn't have a time frame. That's important. And give it a few moments. And the third thing I would recommend though is leave out the screaming shut up, because I usually suggest you do this before you go to bed at night. It only takes a couple of moments. And leave out the screaming, as I said. People around you might get upset. Now, here is some more good news. I'm sure we all like good news. How long does it take to change your memory ability? If you have taken 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years to have a bad memory, it doesn't take that long to fix it. Wow, sounds interesting. How long? It generally will take 3 to 4 weeks. About 2 minutes a day. Wow, is that a hardship? I don't think so. Because what happens is that when you say, I have a good memory, you're actually creating some junk, but good junk. Because when you say, I have good memory, it displaces in here that you don't have a good memory. Why? Because this layer cannot hold a positive and a negative at the same time. It's impossible. You've already created the negativity, which is so easy for us to pass around to everybody else. Positive, I have a good memory, displaces. In about 3 to 4 weeks, you'll find your memory is extremely good. You're not creating a good memory, you're unblocking. Remember, you already have the perfect memory. Stop saying, I get so annoyed when I hear people say, oh, I got a terrible memory, I can't remember anything. They are creating that. They didn't have a bad memory to start with. But by saying that over and over, you create it. So stop using that expression. Now, one more thing I wanted to expound on is that your subconscious holds tons and tons of memories. The reason why the conscious doesn't access the subconscious memories very well is actually more logic. The conscious basically is bouncing around about 22 cycles per second on the average day. The subconscious is about 7 cycles per day. Easily you can see that's about a 3-to-1 ratio. Anybody ever remember trying to learn to drive a car as standard and they're grinding the gears because they just don't mesh well? That's basically the same thing. Why we have to go to sleep every 24 hours, I always ask the crowd who knows why we have to do that, and you get people that say things like new jammies or new bed or something. It's actually a mental thing. Your conscious has a memory also, but it's not very big. Remember, 5%. But it will hold, but it holds only 1 day's worth of events. Good example, have you ever had a time in your life where you couldn't figure out how to handle a situation and you wake up the next day after a good night's sleep with ideas? Anybody ever had that? Quite a few people do. And I explain why does that work. It's simple. When you're going to sleep at night, unless you're a night worker, you're slowing your conscious down from 22 down to 7. When they're the same speed, they mesh together. This layer in between disappears and everything you did for the day drops down, is filed and sorted. Another good example, ever remember trying to cram for exams and you start feeling a bit thick? Like right now? It's because it's full. You're not going to go any further. Also, that can backfire. You ever heard of people sometimes not having a good night's sleep? Well, if it's happened to you, you ever notice that the next day you're not quite wide awake or quite clear thinking? And if you say you did, I won't believe you. Because if you've only dropped down half the material, it doesn't take long to fill it back up again. So learning to get a good night's sleep is very important. Quite often it's a past life issue. So, now, good example again is like, because of the speeds, we have a hard time remembering what we did last week, let alone 1,000 years ago. So in hypnosis, now let me explain. Hypnosis works this way. I don't hypnotize you. I help you slow down. Because when you're slowing down, you got more access to subconscious memories. When you're going fast or you lose something and you're panicking, in fact, you probably go way over 22 cycles. Well, the difference between those, such a high amount, poor access. It's slowing down. You ever notice that when you're nice and calm and relaxed, you remember things better? Not a coincidence. That's how this works. Now, one more thing before I get into past life. Why, another thing that I'd like to expound on that we don't make good use of is called health. Health. Anybody out there always say, who's healthy out there? And everybody puts their hand up. And then some go, well, not sure, that type of thing. Now, here's how this works. If we would leave our subconscious alone, we would be extremely healthy, very healthy, because it affects our immune system. Healing, immune, disease, it fights it quite well. But we don't leave it alone, do we? We like to expound junk. For example, don't talk to Johnny, he's got a cold. If you talk to him, you're going to catch that cold. Anybody ever heard that? We all have heard that. Do you believe you'll catch that cold? I get people say no, and then the answer is actually yes. More than likely, because if you believe you're going to catch that cold, your subconscious will adjust to help you. It will lower your immune system. So be careful how you talk to yourself. Careful. Now, a good example though is that actually I've worked with medical doctors, and one of them mentioned that it's not called white corpuscles anymore, it's called white blood cells, but I'm sure you know what that means. It's your defense system. Well, they've proven that people recovering from operations in hospitals, which is a good place to have them, are often producing after the operation only about 30% of the white blood cell count. That is not very good. And why is it not good? It means that your defense system is lowered, dangerously low. Now, why does it happen? It's your mind again. Hearing junk. Whoa, there's sick people in this hospital. I hope I don't catch that. Or things like, hey, I heard people die from these operations. Well, your subconscious is it will be going like this. Hey, I can show you. I can help you. Remember, it's there to help you. Careful what you think. Now, I've actually, one of the doctors I work with too, confirmed what I'm going to say. I've read that most doctors, and I've heard nurses too, that when they're taking their training, often get the symptoms of what they're studying at the time. He said he was studying about itching and scratching. Within an hour, he was itching and scratching. Your subconscious is so powerful that it can heal your cuts. It could also affect your system to show what you're believing or reading at the time. So again, be careful how you talk to yourself. This now leads me up to another type of person I'd like to expound on, to do with health. And I'll give you a little clue. It starts with an H and it rhymes with chondriac. Hypochondriac, yes. Ever heard of hypochondriacs? I'm sure you have. In a group, I say, is anyone there? Every once in a while I do get one. But what it's about is that hypochondria. Well, let's put it this way. A lady I worked with a few years ago, she used to go to Timmy's, Tim Hortons coffee shop, with her older friends, older lady friends. She had 3 of them. And she said that when they sat down with their tea or coffee, they would then bring out their pills to see who's got the most pills they're going to take that day and brag about their aches and pains. She said she couldn't take it anymore. She said, were bragging. Why in the world would you brag about how sick you are? That is way beyond me. Why? Mainly it's because they got attention. You see, it usually started when they're younger. Johnny, don't go to school, you got a cold. Well, I heard Johnny doesn't like school. So he just got rewarded, didn't he? Subconscious is there to help you. It's there all the time to help you. It's going to go, wow, he liked that. Got off school, and how did that happen? He was sick. Let's keep him sick. Now, that's a little bit of an overview, but that's how this works. Because how long can you go along patting your friend on the back, listening to their aches and pains? How long can you keep going on doing that before you get to the point where you can't pretend anymore you care, or you end up avoiding them? Because who wants to stand and sit around listening to people's aches and pains? I'd rather brag about how you don't take any pills or that type of thing. No, but they brag because they got attention. To me, that is one of the saddest types of attention there is. Now, I'm going to mention something. One of the doctors confirmed with me a couple of years ago. The word is fibromyalgia. Now, when I have my clients come in to see me, they often come in with their 37-letter word and the C1s and C2s, and I say, just where is it? Lower, middle, upper back, or that type of thing. But the only word I bothered to learn to pronounce is fibromyalgia. I'm sure you've heard of that. He said that is the disease for hypochondriacs. It means that they've done all the testing for that person's ache and pain, cannot find anywhere where it came from, so they call it fibromyalgia. It's sort of a coverall. It's actually past life, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So, the whole thing I said about, again, is hypochondriacs? No. Is it a coincidence that happy-go-lucky people are generally healthier than people that whine and complain? Not really. So remember, be careful how you talk to yourself. Now that I've expounded on those parts, I want to get now into past life. Knowing how your mind works makes it easier now for this part to make more sense. A couple of things, first of all, is that I'm sure you might have heard at some point in your life, like, oh, that past life stuff, it's all their imagination, or they saw it on television. If anybody heard that they saw on television, here's an answer to give that person. Say to them, who wrote the TV show? Somebody saw another TV show, How far back do you go before television wasn't around? Also, it's more logic. It'd have to be the same thing, wouldn't it? But Who, as the producer, is going to hire you as a writer to write the same program that's already been out there? So that doesn't really hold. And I know it's going to be a bit profound for some people or shock, but television is not always the most accurate thing. You're right. Good example is like, I don't have any movie in mind, but we've all seen movies from the old days, or like the Castles and the Knights and I hope they've had their annual bath type thing too. What happened was, you see, unless it's a chick flick, there's no bad guys. And, you know, it's going along nice, beautiful castle, nice moat and beautiful gardens, and wait a minute, there's a moat. Anybody ever notice that there's a moat around the castles? Everybody always shakes their head yes. And then I say to the crowd and to you, what was the moat for? And I'm sure you'll figure out what most people say. It's called, hey, defense. Well, that's what they'd like you to think, because television is not the most accurate. They want to make things look kind of nice. The moat was for their sewer system. That's what it's about. That's why they always built near a water source and have it diverted around the castle and out again. It's their sewer system. So inadvertently, it could be defense, because who wants to go through the moat with that kind of stuff floating through it? In fact, they always had up, the turrets would have little rooms like outhouses where you lift the lid up and you're looking right down to the moat. And you did your business. In fact, during sieges, most people didn't use the toilet system because they used to assign archers to catch anybody that sits there. Imagine how embarrassing it would be. How did you get killed in that era? Because I got shot with in the butt with an arrow. So a lot of people had a lot of constipation. Plus, another quick thing too to explain about television not being accurate is dungeons. Everybody I've worked with has died in a dungeon at least once. And offhand, what do you think their toilet system was? Usually it's your pants, because you were chained up. So that isn't shown because it doesn't look nice. But it's also why I've had a lot of clients that have helped them get rid of leaky bladder problems, constipation, irritable bowel syndrome, that type of thing. It's from dungeons. So, because you had no self-respect and just no sense waiting for anything, you just let it go. Now, the other key thing, what I'm going to bring up now, a very, very profound statement, is the word imagination. I'm sure you've heard that word, but it is one of the most misused words in the English language. There's no such thing. There is no such thing as imagination. Very profound statement. Let me explain how I show this. What I do is I have everybody in the crowd, and I want you to do this too, is to close your eyes. Be about a couple minutes. Close your eyes. Now, in your mind's eye, I want you to see or sense or visualize a lemon. A big, bright, yellow, sour, juicy lemon. Now, see yourself cutting it up into little pieces and taking a bite of one of those pieces of sour, juicy lemon. Feel that texture. Chewing it. Swallowing it. And wait, there's still more lemon. Let's have another piece of that yellow, juicy, sour lemon. Chewing that and swallowing it. Now open your eyes. Quite often by that point, I usually don't have to go any further, because most of the people in the crowd will be doing either making faces at me like this or making swallowing motions. It's because they were tasting the lemon. I do get people saying, well, I like lemons. Well, that's nice. Doesn't matter. It's still the most common fruit or that will make your mouth water. Now, in a regular crowd, most people will have their mouth water. There's always occasional person say that their mouth didn't water whatsoever, but I always have found that I can find a food that would. Everybody has a food that you know, the adage, don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. Chocolate cake looks good. Let's get two of them this time. So, Yes, there's always something. But the point I'm making here is that if your mouth watered, that means your body reacted. Correct? Go ahead, this. But how could it be reacting if there's nothing in your mouth? Your body's reacting to one thing. It's one word, starts with an M. It's called memory. Because you've had one. It is 100% impossible to have your mouth water by thinking of something that makes your mouth water if you've never tasted it. If you've never had a lemon in your life, your mouth will not water. How can you make it water? Well, let's see. Let me imagine something make my mouth water now, or something sour. Let's think of salt. Hello, you're thinking of another memory. You cannot have your mouth react to imagination. You've had to have tasted it before. So therefore, there's no such thing as imagination. What it is though, it's a memory, but we don't always remember where it came from. Now this brings me up to the next point, and it's to do with now into the past life thing, is that there are people out there that have fears and phobias. Perhaps you're one of them. Or you know people with them. There's tons of different types, from butterflies to elevators to tight spaces to rats and spiders, lots of things. Now, there's a difference between a fear and phobia and a respect for that fear. For example, a fellow came to see me about 10 years ago, came in and he said, I would like to have you do a session with me. I have a fear of heights, he said. But he says, I don't believe in past lives. And I said, don't care. Come on in. So what happened though is that I have a respect for heights. If I'm standing on a cliff, I like to make sure I'm hanging on to something, especially if it's windy. He could not go past the second step of a step ladder without the fear, without the butterflies, the sweats. Wait a minute, butterflies and sweats. His body is reacting to what? A memory, except different life. So whether you're not sure about past lives or are, let's talk like there is, because there really is. So what happened was he came in for a session. One thing I like to mention is how hypnosis works. I do not hypnotize you. I mentioned that before, very strongly mention it again. In hypnosis is basically you slow down. I help you slow down from 22, not to 7, because if you slow down to 7, you'd fall asleep. And it's free to sleep at home, isn't it? I help you slow down close to it, because when you're close to that same speed, it's easy to access the memories. That's how this works. But he just didn't remember where that memory came from. So that's what we're all about. I slowed him down. And the only thing different is that in the session, he is sitting in a chair with his eyes closed, your client's eyes closed. There's no laying down, because that's another stereotyping, is well, where do I lay down? I've heard that one. I said, why? You can sleep at home for free. You sit in a chair, because see, the problem why people have that thought is because of the misconception, la la land, they're going to float away. They think that if they sat on a chair, they'd fall off. Hello? When you're daydreaming, did you fall off your chair? No. Same thing. You're totally aware where you are. Just slow down, accessing the subconscious. So I help them slow down. Now the way this works is this way, is that when you do go into hypnosis, again, as I said, totally aware, always there, you still hear me. Now, what happened though is that when you start off in a past life, now here's how this works. When you have a concern, I simply have you slow down and I'll say, go to the past life. That's the cause of the concern with him, fear of heights in this life. That is how it works. That is so simple. There's no go through the blue mist, go down corridors, look for doors. Don't know where people get that. That is not what you need. Your subconscious is a computer. It works extremely fast. It'll always take you to the correct past life you're being affected from. It doesn't show you half a dozen past lives and say pick one you like. It doesn't work that way. It always picks the correct one. Now, what happens too is that when you go back into the past life, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, but sometimes you start off looking through the eyes. Sometimes you're already watching yourself. And I'll know which one you are doing because I'll ask you, are you looking through the eyes or watching yourself? If you're looking through the eyes, I'll say move to the side and observe yourself. Now, being a male, when I first heard this, that they could watch themselves outside of the body, I got confused because I think of cameras, lenses, but it's because we have energy. Now, even people that aren't sure about past lives do agree that there's energy. We feel it. You can walk into a crowded room sometime and cut the tension with a knife, or walk up to somebody who's got, a really happy person, and as you get close to them, you can sense it because your energy, which starts in you, goes out but gets thinner and thinner, will bump into their energy and you'll feel it. So even the ones that aren't sure about past life do agree with that. Now, what happened though is that I need you to move back and watch yourself for a couple of reasons. One, easy to describe yourself. I've had people hear people tell them, go to a life, when you're in that life, look for a mirror. Well, I've had about 20 people in caveman days that are still looking for the mirrors. Doesn't work that way. I have you move outside and you can watch yourself from all directions. There's another reason for that. Is because with my system, you do not have to feel the aches and pains, fears and phobias. You just have to see them. I'll explain that shortly. So what happened though is that there is people out there that have their clients sitting in their chairs, going through that past life, screaming, the pain, the ache, and I cannot believe why you do that. There's 3 reasons why I wouldn't do that. 1, the screaming would hurt my ears. Okay. 2, people would think I'm beating up my client. 3, you don't have to. I'll come to that in a moment. You just have to see it. So what happened was I slowed him down, and actually kind of funny side thing here, why it's good to move back a bit is because you have a bit of control. We don't really need control, but it's nice to know we have it. Because what happens is, there's one lady in the talk, she yells out, says, I got fear of heights. What if I go back and see myself pushed off a cliff, and what if I get traumatized? So I looked at her and said, do you have a fear of heights? She said, yes. I said, you're traumatized already. Why would you go back to a past life to get traumatized? I said to her, you need a better hobby. Okay. You see it, you let it go, and I'll get to that in a moment. So what happened again is that you just have to see it. Now, the advantage of this, what I have you move back, is simple. If I had a bouquet of flowers in my hand and they look kind of pretty, but they kind of stink, well, if I hold them out further away from me, they still look nice, but the smell doesn't bother me. So that's what it's about, is I have you start off before you fall off a cliff, for example, not falling, because then you would be reacting and you'd be thinking and going back up past 22, and the session would not work because poor access to the subconscious memories. So what happened was, if I see my client getting a little antsy, which doesn't happen very often, I simply would say to the client, move back a little bit and observe yourself. Once you see it, it lets go. Now let me explain. With this guy, I say, go back to the past life to do with your fear of heights. And within moments he said, wow, there's a native Indian standing on a cliff about a few feet from me. And he said, whoa, he looks down and says, I'm hovering. Wow, what a good imagination I got. And I said, remember, he didn't believe in past lives. So I said, just tell me what you see. So then he says, wait a minute, there's another native Indian pushing him off. Now, even though he got his eyes closed, it was really quite humorous. He was following it with his eyes going down as the guy fell off. He said, that's not nice. And I said, probably not. Then it suddenly dawned on him. He was talking about it. Remember, people with fears and phobias, especially strong fears and phobias, don't like talking about it because they start to react. Because people with strong fears and phobias always note that it's not hereditary, it doesn't run in the family. And he said, I've never fallen off a cliff, but every time I see a picture of a mountain, I got the butterflies. Remember? Reacting from the memory. Now, here you notice that you're talking about the guy being pushed off the cliff, and it wasn't bothering him. So I said, well, I said, is it gone? And he said, I think so. Then I said, is it past life or your imagination? And he said, I'm not sure. So we continued on, because he had a few other issues to work on. At the end, we do a little synopsis. So I said to him, how's your fear of heights? And he said, it's gone. I said, did you have it for very long? And he said, about 30 years. Then I asked him a question I knew the answer to. I said, did it ever affect your social life? And he said, yeah. He could never take his kids skiing, and he could never take his kids to Disneyland. Here's where a memory from 200 years earlier, and why we knew is because your subconscious is a computer. It gives us the dates as we ask for them. 200 years earlier, plus he didn't look 200 years old, so I knew it wasn't a current life. Not from this life, 200 years ago, was affecting him here, in this life, for no reason, because he didn't know where it came from. So, once he saw it, it lets go. So I said one more time, I said, is it past life or your imagination? He says, I'm not sure. I said, who cares? Because, remember, if you're not sure it's past life or imagination, but the problem disappears, that you've had for 30 years, who cares? If you do believe in past lives, it does work faster because you're not spending half the session going, wow, what a great imagination I got. So, now, let me explain how this whole thing works. The system I've developed, I gave a very complex name. It's called the unknown noise. Anybody need spelling on that one? Okay. Unknown noise, very simple thing. So let me explain how this works. I need you to do rented lips, another word picture, but you can have your eyes open this time. I want you to pretend you're living alone. It's a dark, spooky, windy night. Wind's howling. In the middle of the night, there's a crash, and you jump up and go, what the heck was that? See, I'm being polite there. And you hear the noise again, you go, oh, it's just the wind blowing a branch against the window. So unless it's going to break, well, you would just go back to sleep, wouldn't you? I would. Later that night, there's another crash. You jump up and go, what the heck was that? And then you hear it again, you go, wait a minute, I don't like the sound of that. Never heard that before. That's when you start getting a little, something coming to kill me, boogeyman, that type of thing. Now, unless we check it out, what would we normally do? We pull up our bulletproof covers, and remember when we're kids, nothing gets through there, and we try to get some sleep. Now, you're not going to sleep well because that noise will keep going on. So, next morning, you're going off to work, not very refreshed at all. Going out the door, and you hear that noise again because the wind is still blowing, and you hear it to the left. You turn. The neighbor next door has new metal garbage cans. Always had the bags before. I started doing this in England. Remember, I went to England. If you've ever been to Europe, cobblestones, rock, echoes, buildings are closer, so a lot louder. So pretend you're in England. What happens now is you are going to make a very profound statement. It's called, it's garbage cans. Plus maybe some adjectives about the neighbor's choice of garbage cans. Next day, another dark, spooky, windy night. You're in bed, sleeping. Wind's howling. Garbage cans blow over. But 50-50 chance you probably don't wake up. But if you do, you're going to make that same profound statement again, which is, yes, it's garbage cans. And more adjectives about the stupid neighbor. Now, there is a point here. The noise is the same both nights. Why doesn't it bother you on the second night? And the answer is, you know what it is. Unless you feel the garbage cans are coming to kill you, you would let it go. Because you now know what it is. Now, I want to explain something very clear right now. I don't do readings. There are people that are past life readers who will tell you you're a gypsy or that type of thing because they sensed it. Well, they probably did, but that doesn't do anything for you. Are you going to dance better because you know you're a gypsy? But if you saw that life and felt it and watched it, you probably would dance better. It's seeing. Now, what happens is if I had been a reader and said, oh, it's just garbage cans, and you didn't check it out, the next night that garbage can noise comes along, you'd still be going, I don't know if I trust that guy, still sounds scary. I'm going to look out the window. You open up the windows, it's garbage cans. The whole premise on this is we are an animal that likes to see to believe. Being told does nothing for you. History, maybe amusement, does nothing for your fear phobias. Nothing for your aches and pains. Seeing it, you let it go. If you didn't know it's garbage cans, that noise would keep bothering you. That's how my system works. Knowing, seeing, we let it go. Now there's something else that has a memory too. It's called body cells. The conscious has a memory, remember, small, subconscious, powerful, but the body cells have a memory. One of the common ones that actually half the people in the world have, that's a body cell memory, it's called birthmarks. I've had many people with birthmarks. You may as well call them a death mark because most of them were wounds where they've been shot, stabbed, burnt, lots of different things, or else traumatized. The only nice thing I've ever seen that body cells hold, or actually more heard, is music. Everybody has a tune or two from the past that you hear this tune, you go, whoa, I remember that song. It gives you a nice feeling. Nobody ever goes, that's exciting. You go, wow. And what happened is because, why is that? Is because the body cells have latched onto the tune for you. It knows you like it. And it's triggered by the sound. In fact, a lot of people don't realize you can turn it around and use it for a trigger. If you happen to be down one day, put the tune on. But the main thing that body cells are extremely good at holding is persistent aches and pains. You know anybody with that? Yourself, perhaps? Tons of them. Now, what's interesting is I do get people that say, well, I know where my pain came from. And happened to actually, one of the first ones was in England. A lady came to see me. She said, I got whiplash, car accident. I said, when did that happen? And she said, about 4 years ago. So I said, well, why are you here? She said, well, the painkillers aren't working very well. You do get immunity to them. So I said, interesting, if you left it alone, your subconscious would probably cleared it up within a year. And she said, my medical doctor said the same thing. So he said, let's have a session. Slowed her down, then simply said, let your subconscious take you back to the past life that explains the pain in your neck, or continuing pain in the neck. Within moments, people are at the scene. Now, most people are visual. When we did the lemon, most people see the lemon. Not all, I don't. But whether you see it or sense it, the system still works. Like a blind person doesn't have to see you in the room to know you're there. They can use other senses, sound, smell, that type of thing. But what happened is that she was very visual. Within moments, she's sort of leaning forward and in a crouching position. And she said, well, it's a nice day. Wow, it's in France. Again, subconscious will give us the answers as we ask for them. And then she said, well, lots of people out there, they're all yelling and shaking their fist and smiling and all kinds of stuff. And then she stopped and she looked up. She went, oh my God, I'm being guillotined. I found lately there are people that don't know what a guillotine is, so beheaded is the same thing. Now, I'd say that's probably the biggest pain in the neck you'll ever have. So, what happened was at the end of the session, I said to her, move your head and neck around. And she was very, very slow at doing that because a lot of people with pains and aches don't like moving that part because it hurts. So she slowly started to move, then all of a sudden she's doing this. I said, what are you doing? She said, it's gone. I said, yes, and it won't come back. What happened is that the body cells hold traumatic deaths. And we got lots of them. What happened was it didn't quite finish a life lesson, still hangs in there. So the car accident had triggered the pain in the neck, which triggered the memory of the past life being beheaded. It's because we just don't remember those things. It's not like we wake up every morning and go, oh yeah, I was burnt twice and hung another time. No, we don't generally remember them. Generally. Recurring nightmares are generally is a past life, but in general. Once she saw where it came from, the body cells let go. Because they duplicate the same pain, but once we know where it came from, it lets go. I.e., garbage cans. Once you notice the garbage can, why would the noise still bother you? Nothing to do with that. It was a different life. Let's go. There is one way of having it come back, which I've never had anybody report happening, is only I could see if you love pain. But If you love pain, I think you have another past life that we should check on, yes? Okay. Now, another interesting thing is that when clients come to see me, I tell them to bring a list of stuff to work on. Sometimes people don't put stuff on that they should, because they have, it's been like a way of life, they figure they're stuck with it, or martyr, or whatever you want to call it. So one client came to see me about 3 years ago. She had a list. In there was a fear of deep water. Now I get a lot of people with fear of deep water, and always the interesting thing about that is that those people generally, swimming pools doesn't bother them. It's the deep water that they can't see in, the dark water, maybe sharks, and get many of those. So she had that on her list. So when I went to that one, I said, go to past life to explain your fear of deep water. Within moments, she's going, and I have people start off automatically now watching themselves when they start off. She said, whoa, I'm female, 26. Whoa, looks like a Quaker. Got that neat little hat and the long dress. So I said, where are you? And she said, US, east side or west side? And then she paused, east side. I said, is there a town or city nearby? And she said, yes, there's a town called Salem. Then all of a sudden she paused. Wait a minute. I'm being accused of something. I'm sure you probably heard of witchcraft at Salem, but if you hadn't, that's what it's about. In fact, if you read the chronicles on the Salem those days, most of the people that were killed weren't even close to being witches. If somebody prominent in the community didn't like you, they would say you're a witch. You're toast. Because you see, they did not have to prove that you were a witch. You had to prove you weren't. There's a test that they use for checking that out. It's called water dunking, or because the theory behind it is that witches floated. So if they threw you into the water and you drowned, you weren't a witch. Oh, the poor dear, she wasn't a witch. We're going to miss her. But if you didn't drown, they're going to kill you anyway. So I don't think it's called a win-win situation, is it? Now, with her, they tied her up, threw her in the water, in the river. There's her fear of deep water came from, and she was very resourceful. When she hit the bottom, it was a rocky river. She kicked up, came back to the top. And they quickly yelled, get her out of there, she's not going to drown. And she said, that's good, because if they'd gone down one more time, she said, I probably would have drowned. So they took her out. Normally they would burn witches, but this time, because she was wet, they decided to hang her. What's really very interesting is, again, the client sitting beside me, eyes closed, tell me what they see. I write a lot of notes down. As she's describing being led to the tree with the hanging noose from it, she started doing this, moving her neck around. I said, what are you doing? She said, my neck feels better. I looked at her list of concerns, nothing to do with neck. So when we finished the session, I said to her, when we were doing her synopsis, eyes are open, more aware, I said, what was with the neck? She said, my neck feels good. I said, it's not on your list. She said, well, had it so long. I said, how long have you had this concern? She said, 20 years. Now, don't know about you, but if it was only once every 10 years, no big deal. With her, it was constant. Can you imagine having a pain for 20 years, constant? Now, I said to her, have you done anything about that during the years? She said she went to chiropractors and physiotherapists, spent a lot of money. Now, there's nothing wrong with those trades. They are very good. I use them myself. But your conscious and subconscious, the whole thing is a lot more powerful. So, and she also sent me an email later explaining how much she had spent on pillows, over $600 on special pillows, kind of the foam in them, and would lose their compression or go after a while. She used to keep pillows around the house, so when she sat down, she had some relief. 3 years before I saw her, she had stopped using the chiropractors, and it just wasn't working for her. So I said, well, how's your neck now? And she said, it's gone, it's fine. So I have actually found, though, is that most of the time your aches and pains come in from a past life due to a common emotion. Not all, but most. In that life, she had been falsely accused of being a witch. We worked it out in this life. She had a big family crisis 20 years earlier, and she was accused of being the problem. Falsely accused. Falsely accused. She said within days that pain came along and it never left because she didn't know where it came from. Keep in mind that analogy I use. Garbage cans. If you don't know it's garbage cans, the noise will keep bothering you. You do know what it is, it lets go. And it's been over 3 years since I last communicated with her, and she said it's still gone. The pain is totally gone. Because again, once you know what it is, it lets go. There's actually good things that you can make use of with past lives. Talents. You ever notice that your siblings and other friends, some people have natural talents and some don't? Wrong. Nobody has natural talents. It's like relearning to ride the bicycle. It's easy to remember if you did it before to relearn it again. Good example is Mozart. Mozart was playing piano at age 4, not just little fingers, but his whole hands. 4 years old. Where do you find a piano teacher that can teach you from age 1, 2, and 3 to play the piano? Nowhere. Doesn't happen. If you did, Ripley's Believe It or Not would like to talk to you. What it is that I guarantee I wasn't there, that he had played the piano in many other lives. Easy to relearn to ride the piano, to play the piano. Sorry. Now, what did happen also is that he wasn't 7 or 8. He was younger. So what it means is that he had good access to his subconscious memories. Remember, they haven't split. And it means that he made use of them. But let me do a little side thing here. One thing about it, do you ever hear of kids that have imaginary friends? Or perhaps you do, or did? Well, we don't quite handle that properly. As adults, we usually say to the kids, no, there's no such thing, they'll grow out of it. We should be thinking of another direction. We should be saying to the child, describe the person. Did they bury treasure somewhere? All of a sudden, the new trip down to the Bahamas with the scuba gear because you found out where that sunken treasure was. But what also is that he brought in the memories. Also helped him too was that his dad was a concert pianist and didn't say to him like most people, including me, would say, don't touch that piano, you're going to break it. And he helped encourage him. So you put those two together, he became a child protege. Interesting though, another little aside here is that people will often say, oh, that past life stuff, they're all Cleopatra. You might have heard of that, might not, but that's often used. I have never found Cleopatra yet. Interesting though is I've had over 70 or 80 people rough in that area that have been in famous lives. Names that we'd recognize. But the interesting thing that I'm making here is that no two were the same person. So, using some logic, makes more sense, not all being the same one. Another thing you can make use of in another example of talent, had a fellow come to see me, was art, not painter, with the brush, of course, not the roller. And this guy came to see me and he said, I hear you help people get better with their talents. I'd like to find out why I'm good at art. So I said, hey, come on in, let's do a session. And you believe in past life, so it made it faster. So I had him sit down, and then we got to the point where I said, go to past life to explain your talent with art. Within moments, he's going, wow, this is cool. It's France, 125 years ago, and I had him watching himself as a male painting. And he watched for a while. Then I said, do you want to check out another one? And he said, sure. So I had him go back to another past life. Subconscious showed him a life that was about 300 years earlier and in Italy, painting away. So after a while watching that, I started to say, do you want to go somewhere else? And he said, just a minute. He says, I'm still watching. He wanted to really watch this one. The advantage of working one-on-one, though, is you can tell us to wait. So I left him there for about a month. Just kidding. Now, I saw him a couple years later. He came in and said to see me. He was in my area at the time, and he said, hey, I'm making money as an artist. Now, a lot of you know that's an oxymoron, because that starving artist thing, which really is not what you think it should be. It's the left brain, right brain. Creativity, logic don't go together well. So artists always feel they're not quite finished their work and feel guilty about taking money, which is silly, but that's where the starving artist comes in. But he said, I'm making money. And I said, well, interesting. How did you do that? And he said, remember those two styles that you showed me? And I said, sure. And he said, I took those two styles and I mixed them with my current style and came up with a very saleable style. And he said, I'm making money. Now, I had a feeling now I know why, because I have worked with quite a few artists. Here's a little quick aside thing. Anybody here, I say to the crowd, ever heard the expression, it costs you an arm and a leg? Nobody knows that. So what it's about is that it's from art. Way back in the old days, before cameras, rich people would hire an artist, because they were only rich and poor out there, and would pay an artist to paint their portrait or family portrait and hang it on the wall and brag about how much they spent. And artists in those days knew that they could charge more because they would usually pay it. So they had to sort of rationalize it or justify it. What happened is when they're just painting somebody's portrait, it took X amount of time. But if you wanted your arms and legs in the picture, it took more time, more detail. So that's where it cost you an arm and a leg came from. Now you know. So that's basically what happened. You learn how to take the money. Now, when I did my practice in the Lower Mainland, before I did the past life, an example about how people still misunderstand hypnosis. Because past life, I found, is helpful to get rid of your problem with smoking, weight, and migraines. But the thing about the smoking, I had a client come in, and this was again before past life, that said to me, I want you to make my husband quit smoking. Well, I said, how much duct tape do you have? Because you can duct tape him up, he'll still smoke through some other orifice or something. You have to want to. She was still thinking hypnosis makes you. Not even close. Now, I do find that interesting when I do mention about smoking. I just have a show of hands how many people are still smokers. And right now, the stats in Canada are 19.9% of Canadians smoke. Very, very small. Many years ago, it would be the other way around. And what it's about is that I used to smoke, so did my brothers and my parents, but quit many, many years ago. But it was because of wanting to. What happened is that if you were trying to become a non-smoker, I first of all have you affirm that you do want to be a non-smoker, and then take you to the correct past life. Now, another little interesting thing. On my card, you'll have seen or heard I do regression and progression, because sometimes people will pop up into a future life. Because apparently time, past, present, and future go on all at the same time. You can blame Albert Einstein for that one. I wasn't quite sure about that, but I have seen it. For example, if you had 10 previous lives that you smoked in, the one that started it, you'd logically think would be way back the first one. It could be any of them or the future one. What happened though is that when we find it, it will show you right off the bat that smoking was normal or a way of life or peace pipe with the native Indians, that type of thing. But once you see where it comes from and realize it's nothing to do with this life, it makes it very easy to become a non-smoker. I don't have people become an ex-smoker, I have them become a non-smoker because non-smokers didn't smoke. Now, another thing is weight. You probably in a group that all mentions that people, I'm sure, have all heard about people going on diets. And what happened is that people that go on diets, they follow their regime or their schedule, and they're eating raw this, raw that, whatever. And that's their conscious is in there. The subconscious, remember, does what the conscious tells it or what's in the junk level. But at this point, you're going heavy on the diet, and it has to listen. It'll say things like, I'll have my turn later. So what happens is that you maybe lose 20, 30 pounds and you go, wow, that was good, but a lot of work. I'm just going to take a break, only about a two-day break. Well, boom, it all pops back with 10 pounds of friends to make it hard to do the next time. You probably heard of that happening. Hopefully not with you, but it does happen. The reason for that is because of past lives. What happens is the subconscious member has your memories, and you react to them, or it helps you keep them going if it feels that's what you liked in a different life. What happened is that there's 3 reasons why weight is a concern from past lives. Rich and poor back in the old days, who were bigger? The rich, because they had money to buy food. So if you have a couple of past lives that you were way overweight but rich, being big and overweight in the old days, it was a sign of wealth, power, status. So you got that running around in your back of your mind, that being good or big was good. Your subconscious, when it now has its turn, puts you back, because remember, it can affect your molecular structure. Remember, it can heal your cut, so it can put the weight back on, and it does. The other opposite, one of the 3 reasons why that weight is affected from past lives, is starving to death. We've almost always all starved to death in a dungeon. Same reaction. Body says no, or subconscious says no, we're not going to die. We're not going to starve to death. We're going to put the weight back on. In fact, let's make it an extra 100 pounds so we definitely don't starve to death. So you're fighting against the subconscious, which is very powerful. The other thing, third one, basically I'm hearing a lot of lately too, is more protection. Women were raped back in the old days, and because they were the cutest ones that were captured, and it becomes like a protection, so that in this life that they're less likely to be raped because they're not going to look as good. So even though that wasn't the intention, subconscious does roll that way. So once you see where a past life comes from that is affecting your weight, I actually had a lady just earlier this year who has a testimony that is just going on my site now, that seeing where her weight problem came from, it was about a year ago, she's now lost 125 pounds. And she affirms that is from the session she did with us, with me. So it does work. Now the other thing too is migraines. Migraine headaches and stress headaches are not the same. Migraine headaches are actually past life, because there's no pill that says migraine past life, migraine normal. There's no such thing. I also found out how expensive migraine pills are, very expensive. And I have many clients reporting that 18 months later, still no migraines. It happens all the time because it's a past life. A good example is my brother. Now if you're going to have migraines, you're more likely to be female, and it'll generally start around puberty time, because puberty time is a big change in life. In fact, more people need classes between the age of 10 and 16 than any other time in their life in general, because change of life. Don't want to see what's coming. Have people with hearing problems sometimes, don't want to hear what's coming. But if you have, like again, it's probably going to happen during puberty time, or at least before 20. Now my brother's an exception. He had his migraine start around 13, and the only one in the family, so it's obviously not hereditary. What happened with him is that, remember also, your brother and sister, siblings, you ever notice that they all have different talents, different interests? We all had different interests. What happened was he loved toy soldiers, and every Christmas he'd get toy soldiers, tons of them. And I found them annoying in the middle of the night when you go to the bathroom when I was a kid and stepping on them. So anyhow, I shot them with my cap gun. What happened though was that he loved his soldiers. So one day I was working with him, and he said he had a migraine. And generally migraines are about 3 or 4 days long. They're not like a few minutes. So when he had finished suffering from his migraine, I said, let's go back to past life to explain your concern with migraines. So within moments, he was going, wow, I'm a soldier. Now remember, he loved his soldiers. I said, what's the information? He said, it's in World War II, I'm a British soldier. I'm only about 17. No, I am 17, he says. And it's my first day in the trenches in France. We're going to keep the bad guys out. And he said, it's boring all day long, not a sound. Maybe they're not there. I'm going to take a look. And I thought, oh no. Lifted his head up and he got instantly shot through the head, because both sides used to keep snipers for people that did that. So I thought, better move it along, because he's kind of gone from that one. So I said, anything else? He said, whoa, he says, World War II, I'm a soldier again. He really loved his soldiers. And I said, what's the information on that? And he says, I'm a Canadian soldier being trained in England. Now, when I was doing this session with him, this was in England. What happened was is he had gone over to England to buy a pub, so I went over to visit him. So it was in this very, very small town called Seaford, on the southern coast. So what happened was is that he saw himself, and I said, where are you being trained? And he said, Seaford. That's why he was attracted there. I have a lot of clients that have gone to different countries for holidays and felt like they were home. And sometimes couldn't get out there fast enough because it wasn't like home. It depends on previous past life experiences. So what happened is that he was World War II Canadian soldier being trained in Seaford. He really was actually there for the Normandy raid, which was the big raid during that World War II where the Allied forces got together in England and were going to make a big assault on France to get France back from the Germans. Now, if that would have probably worked well if the Germans hadn't heard about it months ahead of time. So the Germans were ready on the French side facing the English Channel with their machine guns. My brother is on the landing craft in that war, and of course he got shot through the head again. So I thought, I said, where did the bullets hit you? And he said, in the left temple, both of them. I said, where did they exit? And he said, the back right, both the same. So I thought, I said, where do your migraines start? And he said, wow, they always start right here. And I said, do they travel? And he said, yes, they go to the back right corner. Same trajectory as both wars, the bullets. That's where it came from. That was in 1995 or 1996. He's never had a migraine since. Once you see where it comes from, we let it go. Remember then, no noise. Again, garbage cans. You know it's garbage cans, why would the noise bother you? So, stress headaches are a little bit different. Let me explain how that works. Stress headaches are headaches caused by stress. What happens is the muscles tighten up in your neck, getting all stressed, and it restricts the blood flow. The brain kind of likes this blood, so it causes the blood vessels to swell up to get the blood through. Make sense? When they swell up, they put pressure on pain nerves. So that's where the headache comes from. Why does an aspirin help? A lot of people realize aspirins thin your blood. So if your blood is now thinned, the blood vessels can constrict, big word, and takes the pressure off the pain nerves. Now, does the aspirin take care of the cause or the effect? Of course, the effect. The cause is stress. There's no pill that says this is for stress, not for a headache, for stress. Don't have it. That's where past lives can come in. The main thing to remember is past life therapy. You don't have to believe in it, but it works. Because think of the logic. If, for example, you have a fear of heights, and let's say you realize you've had 100 past lives. If you're a betting person, what's the odds that that fear of heights came from this life? 100 to 1 it didn't. So again, with things like fibromyalgia, when a person has an ache or pain, they can't figure out where it came from, and they label it fibromyalgia, but all it was is a past life. It's an interesting case history I had just a while ago. A woman came to see me. She had sores on her tongue. She's a woman's in her mid-20s. She's had that for most of her life, sores in her tongue. She also had an allergy to fish, can't eat fish. So, slowed her down in hypnotherapy, past life regression, and said, go to the past life, that is the cause. Within moments, she's going, whoa, she says, I'm a male, I'm a king's taster. And, of course, that's what they did, taste the food before the king tasted it. And it was a few hundred years ago. So, unfortunately, that particular day, that your subconscious always goes to the correct date, the king was being poisoned by some of his rivals with poisoned fish. So, of course, he did the tasting, and within 2 hours he died from it. And, of course, the king didn't eat it and saved. So, the last I heard from her is that her tongue sores have disappeared and she now eats fish. Where they come from? Past lives. But if you're not sure and it still works, it doesn't matter. And one more thing to mention, karma. We've all heard of karma. It's actually not payback, it's actually balancing. When I do my session, and my team will do the same thing, we'll take you through at least one dying, and you'll find that it's actually not a big deal. And from there, I take you to your soul group, because you'll see who's in there, what the heck are they doing there, and if you happen to have any karmic concerns, which half the people do, we can also clear that up. Good example is I had a lady come to see me a few years ago. She was in her late 30s, and she said, I want to know why my mother has always been nasty to me. Never do anything nice for her or right for her. She's always nasty. So I said, let's check that out. So within a few moments of getting into the past life, she said, oh, there's the past life, and I'm the nasty mother. She's my daughter. So it wasn't really payback. It was just trying to balance. Because when you have different roles, and then we come into the human form, we don't know who's doing what, because if you did know, you wouldn't learn from it. But when you go back to the soul groups, and see them who's in there, quite often, remember I said your worst enemy is often in your soul group. But maybe that lesson hadn't been finished, so it's a bit confusing, like are we still doing that or not? Or do I have to come back and try and balance? So there's a routine that we do for forgiveness in the soul group, which is very effective. And because she said, my mom's in the soul group, she happened to see you, and she said, nope. I said, let's do the forgiveness. And I saw after that routine, the forgiveness routine, I saw that client about a month later. She came with big smiles. She said, my mom's being nice to me for the first time in 30 years, actually about 38 years. I said, I figured she would, because we can straighten up karma in there too. So people that maybe aren't so nice to you in this life, it can always be changed. One thing though is that if you are looking to find out about your life lesson, that will not work. We do not show you that, they will not show you what your life lesson is, because how would you learn the lesson if you had your script in your pocket? But they do like it if you get rid of the stuff, the junk, the fears and phobias, the aches and pains that have come in from other lives not done, that's keeping you from doing your current life. They do like you to get rid of those. So once again, the past life therapy that I have developed is extremely effective and works very, very quickly and effectively. I have trained my team to do the same methods, so book your session with them. Remember my mantra, if you're not sure it's past life or imagination, but it works, who cares?